Hello, and welcome back to Tiny Artist TV. Today's video is video number 8 in the Aughost drawing challenge series, and the penultimate, that is to say, the second to last video. After this, I will only have 3 prompts left, and like I mentioned in the last video, it is going to roll over into September, but we will have done all of the prompts except for that one. If you know, you know. But let's go ahead and get into the video because I have 5 prompts to cover today. So I'm not even going to say what they are. You saw them at the beginning and you'll see them as the video goes on. So let's get started. First on the docket, we have gelatinous. And I did go a pretty obvious direction with this one. I made a gelatinous cube, but this particular gelatinous cube is inhabited by the spirits of everything or all the adventurers that he's eaten in the past. Another direction, narratively, there we go, that I had thought of taking with this one was that this was one particular adventurer that had gotten consumed by the gelatinous cube, and someone needed him for an adventure, so he paid a necromancer to bring his friend back to life, but because he's stuck in the gelatinous cube, he's just this thing now. And style-wise, I was actually inspired by a collection of Halloween candy that I did. I want to say it was maybe back in 2019, possibly. I'll have to double check the date on that, but this is that collection of candy. Very fun, very whimsical, again, a little rubber hosey in nature. I just wanted to start the video with something fun because I had darker ideas for some of the upcoming prompts. Now, as far as the execution of some of the other prompts, they may not be like scary per se, but I definitely always want to do at least one fun one in the bunch. And so this is my Oopie Goopy gelatinous cube ghost. I think he's super cute. Yeah, so now we'll move on to the next one, which is prompt number 25, and that is going to be Paige. This particular prompt, I don't quite remember what I had originally thought of, just because once I got onto this idea, that's the only thing that stuck in my brain. It's the idea of that little voice in your head at 3 o'clock in the morning when you should definitely be sleeping and you're in the middle of a good book and you just have to read one more page. So we have here a college student in the library, study hall, whatever you want to call it. And you can very clearly see the bags under her eyes. She just wants to go to bed. But this little enabler behind her, this little spirit of the library who loves company, loves seeing what people are up to and what they're reading, is just sort of gently whispering in her ear, yeah, just one more page and then you can leave, then you can go to bed. Unfortunately, the dark side of this particular, what on the surface seems like a lighthearted little piece, people can die from exhaustion. I don't know if you knew that. So this ghost occasionally entices people to the point where they get so exhausted that they pass on, and then they themselves also become one more page ghosts. Have fun with that. But this is prompt number 25, Paige, for today's video. Short and sweet. So we're moving on to prompt number 26 now, which is a little less short and sweet. Although the idea itself is relatively simple, the execution of the idea is where the complexities come in, because I really wanted to get granular with the details of this one. So prompt number 26 is perforate, which it's to have little holes poked in. And so, like, you know, those perforated sheets of paper where you can just easily tear things off. You see where I'm going with this. This is the spirit of a torture victim. And I wanted to give this particular ghost a doll-like feeling. And so not only are the places where he was sort of poked and prodded and tortured articulated in like perforated lines to sort of look like stitching. The hair is made of yarn. He has needles poking all throughout him, scissors around his ankles. I later add another scissor silhouette around his body, and then the shadow underneath him also has that same look to it, just so that there's some movement and some symmetry between the piece, because right now it's just this large curved figure. But I also made his skin, when I get into like doing the skin and body, I added wrinkles to make it look more sack-like and more doll-like, to just really emphasize that this, when he was alive, was basically just someone's plaything. So yeah, this has actually a very similar, to me, has a very similar feeling to the ring, the aerial acrobat that I did back in, I believe it was video 2, early in the series. And I really like the way those two connect, with just the way the body just kind of morphs and moves. And so with this one, because this felt more like a piece of art than just a sketch, I really wanted to just take time with it and just make all those little details matter. And then after I finish the initial line art, I go back in and decide that it needs just a little pop of color, because there is so much just black and white lines. So I add an extra layer of red to kind of break up visually everything that's happening. And so you really have to kind of look at it and sit with it and look at all the little nitpicky details. And I'm really pleased with the way it turned out. Not only because like I was able to, again, do a pose that's not typical of, you know, ways bodies move. And I do know that the foot, like if you actually try to do this pose, the foot is turned further than you should be able to turn it, implying that either this particular individual was double jointed or his foot was broken, and that's why he's able to turn it that way. But yeah, just really getting into the nitty gritty with some of the shading to really add that thread-like texture into the hair. And then here you can see where I'm adding in that scissor shadow to parallel the scissors that are at the top, and just really pull this whole thing together and give it more visual weight and interest throughout the whole piece, instead of it just being on the subject in the middle. Moving on to prompt number 27, which is brood. Now, I don't know how well I actually executed this idea in the way I had originally envisioned. I could have spent probably another 30 minutes to an hour really working on this and making it more like funky and gory, but this video was already late by the time I was working on this prompt, and I spent a good, like, I want to say almost an hour just getting really granular with the details and textures once I finished the initial sketch. So brood, because there are several definitions, I wanted to create a ghost that incorporated all of those definitions. So if you brood, you kind of like ruminate on something in a sort of melancholic way. Like if you're in a brooding mood, you're just kind of like, this sucks and I feel gray. And so the middle ghost itself, the meat of this mass, if you will, encapsulates that, and anyone who encounters it gets pulled into its gunky, brooding, molasses ennui. You're just stuck there, stuck in your sorrow, stuck in your foul mood, brooding for the rest of your unnatural life. Other definitions of brood include a group, like a brood of vipers or a brood of hens, even though, you know, a flock, but a brood is a group. And so not only do you have the attitude of brooding, but then you have the brood, so there are multiple figures pulled into this. And then last, is a descriptor of the thing that produces the group, i.e. a brood mare, which obviously was originally attributed to horses, but can also be described or used to describe people who have been forced to have children in certain situations, have been referred to as brood mares. And as I was working on this, I had just finished listening to Baraska not too long ago, and so that imagery was fresh in my mind. I guess minor spoilers if you haven't read or even heard of Baraska. It's I don't know if you would call it a creepypasta because it's a full-blown story with chapters, but it deals heavily with that kind of subject matter. So, to be on the nose, give a little lightheartedness to all this wonkiness that's happening. There is a horse also stuck in here who was stuck with its rider and possibly was being mistreated by the rider, so trigger warning for animal cruelty. I did put that at the top of the video as well, but now we're here. Now you're seeing where that's coming into play. Of the horse having been not super happy throughout his life, ended up sucked into this brooding, goopy spirit. And I know some of you might be looking at this thinking like, oh, another blob. Well, yes, because a lot of the mental health ghosts that I depict, a lot of mental health makes you feel like a blob. But all the blobs look different. So here are the other ones for comparison. So this one is, I am grouping them together. They are intentionally stylistically similar because they are all reflecting the same genre of thing. So yes, this is prompt number 27, and that brings us to the last prompt for today, which is going to be prompt number 28, and that is going to be Ruckus. And this is probably my second favorite of the batch after Gelatinous, because I do think Gelatinous is really cute, but this illustration was fun to whip up, and you'll see why after the sketch is done. So when I thought of Ruckus, I thought of what is a more interesting way to have a ghost make a bunch of noise. And then I started sketching this, and I was like, oh, this is cute. This looks like Louis Zhang's cover for Ghost Duet. And then I said, haha, just kidding, we're gonna actually make a full-on band of banshees. So yeah, we're gonna end on, I guess, I don't want to toot my horn and say a bang, but it's obviously much more involved than some of the other pieces that I've done for this particular challenge. I looked at the timestamp for how long it took me just to do the line art. I didn't keep track for the sketching of this new piece. It took me 47 minutes to do the line art, so I obviously spent a little more time on this one than I have for the others, but doing full figures and then 4 of them, which even though they're ghosts, they still have to be posed properly with instruments. I don't know if y'all know, but instruments are kind of funky to draw, and I do use references, and I know someone might be down in the comments when it gets to the part of the bass guitar, like, oh, why'd you put a hole in the bass guitar? Because I did initially do the bass guitar without reference, and then I went back to a reference and fixed it. So hold your panties, the bass guitar does get fixed by the end of this drawing. But this is Saoirse and the Banshees, obviously tying into Irish ghost folklore of the harbingers of death. If you hear a banshee scream, that means that either you or someone close to you is intended for death. And so this is a ghost cover band. They sing Irish folk songs, Scottish folk songs, emo music covers. The pose, the character itself in the front was sort of inspired by Amy Lee on the Evanescence cover of Fallen, very iconic baby emo, like baby's first emo CD. And I just wanted to do a elevated version of that first sketch because I was going to just do lines on that sketch and call it a day, but I said no, let's actually like do this prompt justice and have fun with it and like go all out. So that's what I'm doing for prompt number 28, Ruckus, with Saoirse and the Banshees and our emo folk cover band. The only reason that this illustration isn't colored is simply because I literally did this the day before I'm posting this, which was already a day later than I wanted to post this video. I do want to go back and actually color this and potentially like put it in my shop as a print. I don't think there's going to be any interest, but you never know. I'll at least make it available. But this might be a video where for October I just go back, revisit this one, and just have it be a chill one, or maybe even just a stream where I go in and color so you can kind of see how I handle coloring that's not just a simple execution. But this is prompt number 28, Ruckus. And that, of course, brings us to the end of this video. So we only have one left, and then we will be done. I can put this ghostly beast behind me and call it another year of Aughost successful. So if you've made it to this point, thank you for tuning in. Thank you so much. Please comment down below which ones were your favorite, or if you hated them, comment that too. Engagement is engagement. But anyway, until the next time, I'll see you guys later. Have a weird day.